What's going on? What's going on? Thank you all for joining me here, man. We got another health stream going on. Been looking forward to this one for a while. We got our brother in Christ, Dayz of Noah here. He's going to drop some gems on health, wellness, all things concerning taking care of yourself, our personal experience, things we've learned, a lot of good, heavy discussions about the plant based, uh, meat based, or anything in between. We're just going to be objective. We're going to, sorry about that. We're going to break this stuff down, just our view, because there are things that people are not discussing that really is not to take a side, but just to present some just objective evidence that's not being considered. So, without any further ado, let me introduce my brother here, Dayz of Noah. What's going on, bro?
Hey, what's up, man? Peace. Thanks for having me.
Hey,
Happy
man,
to be
we at
back
we at it again, man. I
at
know
it again.
I set it for 6:30, but we're gonna go ahead and get people come in here as they see the message. We know we shadow banned over here because we dropping facts. We telling it like it is. So before we get started, quick shout out to people. What's going on, brother Rob Tick? Mortify Eyes Unto Miracles. That's brother How. What's going on, Dale Griffith? Pixie Doodle, man. We appreciate you all rocking with us, man. We about to, man. We got so much knowledge, so much information, so much just practical, of such a practical, analytical view of these things, and we just want to share because a lot of people are struggling trying to understand and comprehend the times we're in, how to take care of yourself, how to reason, how to discern simple things. We're going to make this stuff simple because it is simple. We're not medical professionals. This is not medical advice. We're just doing this for informational and educational purposes only. And we're offering our view through our personal research, life experiences, and everything in between about how we've come to understand how the body works through, living. We're actually living what we're saying here when it comes to our lifestyle in health and understanding of nutrition and detoxing, and everything in between. So, brother, anything you want to say before we get right into it?
Man, not in particular. I'm just happy to be here, man. I'm ready to chop it up. We had a little, I guess, a proto version of the discussion a little bit earlier. So yeah, I'm ready to jump into where we left off, man. I
All
think
right.
last we were really talking about. We talked a little bit about ADL, LDL, and cholesterol. We were going into the importance of I guess the objectivity we were
Yeah.
focusing on the objectivity of nutrition and just dietary practices in light of the current popularity and almost cult following of a lot of extreme diets.
Exactly.
And that's across the board. I think that's including them all, whether it be veganism or carnivore. Though we were discussing like there is levels to it, right? Just because something's extreme doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't have use, doesn't mean it can't be helpful or advantageous. And then we were talking about how diet is inherently relative due to someone's genetic makeup,
Yeah.
their I guess history, right? Their constitution, their bodily constitution as an outcome of the diet that they've practiced throughout their life mixed with their genetic predispositions. So,
Yeah.
nature nurture kind of makes diet inherently subjective, which is always something to have as a foundation when you're addressing or approaching eating and what you're eating, right?
Yeah.
So I think we could start there and just the importance, at least as far as we see it,
No, I
the
totally understand.
trying to be objective, sensitive to the subjective, but at the same time weighing the pros and cons within, say, extreme diets and dietary practices in general.
Well said. It's to kind of go back in history a little bit in time, I was just telling you about this today. About in the 50s, there was a war on fat. Now we got to understand, back in those days, people ate more of a animal based diet just naturally. Coming off of farms, coming off of raising your own food, animals, growing your own crops. They lived off of literally what they grew and raised. So the fat came with the meat. If you were cooking an animal like a cow or something, you would understand that the fat, it's all together, and it's like, how should I say this? It's like they knew that in the natural design of how we should eat, that organically the fat and the protein come together. And what they wanted to do was strip the fat out of products, because this is where processing came into play. Counterfeit food products. I hesitate to use the word food, but they wanted to create counterfeits and strip all the fat, off, especially off the meat. You see a lot of lean meat, and people, because I guess it looks better to see a lean cut of beef. But, honestly, animals are naturally fatted. If you think about when they say a fatling or a fatted calf, that's just how animals were when they ate natural diets. And all the nutrients, fat, soluble vitamins are in the fat. So, we were talking, and I was saying earlier that they wanted to deflect away from the processing and these high sugar, refined sugar diets, and demonize fat. And it's not really fat that's the issue. It's the and you were talking about this earlier. It's the high refined carbohydrate processed foods that cause fat to be an issue. You
In
want to
addition,
elaborate?
in
In
yeah,
addition,
in addition to the fat. And you had such a good point. You were saying, because we were discussing how, like, at one point, and still to this very day, but I remember in the 80s specifically and into the 90s, there was this big low fat movement, and people would be rushing to the grocery stores to get boxes of processed foods, plastic wrapped processed foods, packaged foods that have low fat written on them, and that would be, oh, let me get this, is low fat. Yet the food is actually not food. If we're going, like you said, we have to be careful on how we even use the term
right?
food, because it's lost its meaning, very simple, similar to how woman or man has lost its
Hmm.
meaning. Food has lost its meaning because now we're calling synthetic, highly processed foods or non-foods food. But it's interesting how there's this time where we weren't really eating food, but the fact that it had no fat on it, on the box, that encourages us to eat. And what happens is we start having these diets that are predominantly processed foods with, say, very, very high processed carbohydrates with sugars and all types of preservatives and dyes and all types of things that wreak havoc on our limbic system, right? And in addition to that, we're eating the normal stuff like fats and meats and things like that. And when we have all of these combined, this can cause a whole lot of issues, from weight gain to even the development of diabetes. And it's it's just important to realize that, I think, that we've been lied to about very natural, primary sources of nutrition and diet. Like you said, we ate things, especially if we want to go back to the 40s and 50s and even earlier, we ate things that were around us. We even would eat more seasonally, right? If you live near farms, you would eat off the farms. You would go directly to
Exactly.
ranchers. There would be, or you'd grow your own. In many cases, people would have, crops in the backyard. There was always cooking your own food was normal. We didn't have the restaurant and fast food industries like we would later develop. So we also had more accountability to, ourselves with regard to being satiated and eating in general. If you didn't cook, you ain't eating. You know what I'm saying? If you We had to figure out ways to acquire foodstuffs. And also, as you said, we ate what was around us. If there's
Yes.
meat, there's fat, right? Right when you started this, I was thinking of the milkman, right? Wasn't there this
Hmm.
just a normal thing? The milkman come dropping off the milk, nice, fresh milk straight from the cow, good fats, calcium, all of these things. I mean, these are just general aspects of certain parts of culture. We understand regions are different, but overall, we all kind of stuck to a more, if whether it be farm to table or at least localized way of
Exactly.
eating, right? And all of that changed after World War II into the 60s when factories and mass production started to develop. And this didn't just it wasn't just food, it was also housing, right? When we think
Yes.
of mass produced homes, what's that big development that started it all? It starts with a L. Um, it's escaping me, but it when we got the suburbs and all of this
Right.
stuff, right? Levittown, I think it was what it was
Yeah.
called,
Yeah. I think that's
Levittown. So there, mass produced homes, factory processed foods, and in the development of all these factories, there's all these new substances and materials that we would start scaling to make money and put in the food. And I think we could look at high refined sugars and seed oils as two key substances and materials that were scaled and then introduced into the food for more to do with financial gain than actual nutrition. And we could also look at something like fluoride, which had a similar use, right? It was under the guise of whitening or strengthening enamel or what have you, but really it was just a way to scale an industrial product. So I think it's important to kind of get back to
hmm
some of these older ways of not just eating, but relating to food and nutrition and diet. And what I mean by relating is not only having a relationship with the food such that you are acquainted with the substances you're putting in your body, but also you're accountable, right? We're making the decisions for ourselves by hand picking what we're eating. And hopefully, though I know this isn't easy for everyone, it's very difficult for people that have a lot of kids, that work a lot as well. It's very difficult to get in order in this way, but to actually cook your own food, right? So getting back to having a real relationship and bond with what we're eating, even the sources, like whether that be ranchers or butchers,
Right. Right. Right.
farms, et cetera, creating these relationships, localizing as much as possible. I know we spend most of our time talking about things that are happening in society, happening in culture, but this is a massive aspect of it as well, because this has to do with how we are able to live within the world. Our wellness and our ability to exist is rooted in our lifestyles and what we put in our bodies for fuel. So I think these things are just as important, and they also are another way to resist what's coming and what's happening right now by going back to more local ways of seeing things and relating to things, not just people and our environments, but food as well.
Well said. Well said. And I want to pick up on a few things you talked about. Now, when you talk about plant based, vegan, carnivore diet, there's a lot of things that people don't understand. And we were discussing that if you eliminate processed foods, soft drinks, certain things that are very inflammatory, very toxic to the body in any of those sections or those subsections of food, you would have an increase in health. And this is what people don't understand. If you have been eating processed foods and you just switch to natural foods, whether it be vegetables, meats, or other things, you would have you would improve in your health because the issue is the processing and the toxicity. So, a lot of times people don't talk about the quality of meat. They don't talk about the gut health to digest meat or vegetables because your body's very adaptive. So whatever you're eating, you develop a microbiome, a microflora to facilitate and process the food you're eating. So I want to talk about the quality of meat. People understanding grass fed, grass finished meats, um, how animals are raised. We all know about antibiotics, steroids, and other harmful effects that animals are going through in the process of raising them. So, because all meat isn't created equal, and then when people, look at, oh, you're eating meat and it's toxic, we understand people have personal preferences and such. So we're not really dealing with that. We're more dealing with the fact that a lot of people don't understand the effect that processed food has on the microbiome to even digest meat properly, if you're eating the right kind of meat, or digest vegetables properly, because we know this agenda of bioengineering is going on. So you want to share? You want us to deal with the plant and the plant based and the meat based?
Yeah, we could touch on that. I think that's important just to kind of get into more objectivity of diet in general. And in the process of moving towards an objective kind of discussion, which I think is expedient because we're able to kind of include everyone in the discussion, we could parse through the more divisive aspects of diet, like, meat eaters versus plant eaters. And myself personally, though I practice more of an animal-based diet, I personally believe, and I think history and just lineage of gene pools, et cetera, agree that we are omnivores, right? We're supposed to eat a type of mixture, a synthesis, if you will, of plant materials and animal materials, animal products. Now, I always have to remember that people's systems are different based on what we discussed earlier. So I do understand that meat might not sit well with every person, and vice versa. Plants might not sit well with every person, because I can look at some ingredients, or let's just say some aspects of plants that are, hard to digest, if we want to think about very general things like cellulose. But we also can think about aspects of plants that can, um, that can in what is it? They can collect over time, like oxalates, and have a type of negative effect on the
Yes.
system, right? And bloating, as an example, and just aspects of plants that are naturally within them to ward off them being eaten, right?
Right. Right. Right.
I've read quite a bit, and I agree. Plants are more so, plants are medicinal, right? More so than they are nutritional. But I do believe there's things like concepts like roughage, right?
Fiber.
The fibrous aspect of plants, I think, are very important. And then again, there's also some aspects of minerals and vitamins that are part of plants that I think are important to the diet. But I just think that it makes a little more sense, just from my personal subjective experience, that having a higher animal protein and fat diet and a minimal vegetable intake is just a better balance for myself personally. And I think objectively, it's actually probably a better route to go overall. Now, I do understand there's totally massive populations and cultures that don't eat meat at all, like in parts of India, as an example. Interestingly, if we were to kind of walk down that road and look at some nutritional statistics, we discover some rather alarming things, from health problems to even bodily structures
Yeah.
and level of fitness, et cetera. And those tend to be rather negative when you take away the meat. But then I think what you're talking about is important as well: quality of meat, right? It's
Yes.
not saying meat is better, because if you're eating like really horrible quality meat, that can have all kind of issues happen inside your system too. So I think this is an important thing to just touch on a bit before we get into a more objective dietary way of living, I guess.
Yeah, and I would also like to say there are times, and I've done this personally, where it's beneficial for me to short term remove meat from my diet. When I'm trying to clear my gut. You know, of course, we've all been traditionalized into bad eating habits. Unfortunately, especially in this country, we grew up, eating a lot of stuff that has a lot of bad stuff in it. So our gut was damaged, and we know big pharma at birth, to go to school, these things affected our microbiome, use of antibiotics and such like this. So when we have effects of eating foods, we really don't consider what antibiotics, um, the modern medical industry has done to kind of throw our body off of balance. And so we really don't know what it's like until we really heal the body, detox, to what it's like to process real food. Because and I have to qualify real food because like I grew up eating cereal, and cereal is probably sprayed with phosphate. It's probably they probably been GMO and or bioengineering food for a long time. When they tell you about it, you need to go back at least 10 years to see when it first was probably in practice, because they're telling you doesn't mean that they haven't already been doing it. Like, we got to realize the forces in these authority figures and what their agendas really are. Like a lot of stuff has been going on before they made it known, because we don't really control the food supply. And that's kind of why they move people away from a more homestead, naturalized living and pushed everybody into this fast-paced corporatocracy where everybody's going to a business to get food instead of cultivating your own food and your own sensibility at home. And people don't do that no more. We go to a grocery store. We're even getting away from going to local farming and a meat warehouse or something like that. That's more, like you said, more farm to table aspect than going through so many third party or middlemen, or middlemen things, or where we have food moving around, so changing so many hands. We don't really know what's happening with the food. We don't even know what's actually grown in this country. And when food is not grown locally, it has to be refrigerated. They have to put preservatives in it. A lot of aspects have changed food. They're chemically ripening food, because the food, when you eat fruit, it's better to get the fruit directly off a tree. When I was growing up, my neighbor had an apple tree, and we literally grabbed apples and we would eat them the same day. Now we don't know how long fruit is in cold storage, what kind of preservatives or wax coatings they spray over this fruit to kind of make it last, and we don't know exactly how long it's been separated from the tree source. So we talk about bioelectricity, life-giving energy that God designed food to have. A lot of this is lost. So we're not really getting the vitality and the nutritional quality of having real food.
That's a great
So
point. Yeah.
yeah. So let me see. And a gut health. This is a huge thing, because a lot of people, they tend to, outside of personal preference, we tend to be biased against certain foods, whether it be plant-based or meat, based on how our body reacts. But like I said, are we cultivating the right microflora to not have adverse effects from eating meat, or have we started to heal and negate some of these things that were done to us as children to disrupt our microbiome and to kind of put everything back into a homeostasis where we can eat real food? If you notice, they're trying to engineer people to eat fake food. They distort your microbiome, and they give you all these. If you go to a store, the biggest aisle of the store is gastrointestinal over-the-counter meds to
Oh yeah.
heartburn, acid reflux, all of the stuff that can go wrong with your gut, indigestion, all these things. It's a huge aisle,
It's
and
a
we
huge
don't.
it's a huge industry because of the or adaptation we're
Yeah.
undergoing in response to just the fake processed
Hmm.
nutrition. Go ahead.
It's almost like they anticipated us having a reaction,
Hmm.
where they created a whole industry to negate symptoms while deflecting away from the root cause, which is, what are we eating? Is it real? The quality of it? Where is it coming from? What's in it? When something says apple, that doesn't always mean apple, like from a natural apple. They're kind of creating counterfeit foods and putting chemicals together, creating flavors. When something says it has apple in it, that doesn't mean it has any natural apple in it. It could have chemicals that are put together to give a apple-like flavor and have zero apple in it. And we see a lot of stuff, like when they say natural flavors, these are advertising words. These are not real words. Natural flavor, everything, even chemicals are natural. Oil is natural. Petroleum is natural, but it shouldn't be in your body. And that's, we're being manipulated through epistemology and reinterpreting and redefining terms and words away from their natural design, their natural function. And if you think about processed food, it's causing high blood sugar. And a lot of people don't realize that you're eating these refined carbs, these processed foods, and you're developing things like insulin resistance, or your body's not able to process uh, the sugar in your blood, and your insulin in your pancreas is being worn out. Your beta cells are dying. You can't produce insulin to counteract the sugar, and the sugar is not being assimilated in the body because it's not a natural sugar encased in enzymes and fibers like when you eat real food. If you put sugar in the blood outside of it being packaged with fiber, enzymes, all the right things, your body's not going to assimilate the sugar. And so you're going to have to produce more insulin to counteract the high sugar level, and that's going to wear out your insulin. And a lot of times, high blood sugars and fats are where you get the cholesterol issues. Not cholesterol in and of itself. Most of your brain is cholesterol. Your cell wall is composed of cholesterol. Your steroid hormones, estrogen and testosterone, are manufactured by cholesterol. It's very vital, but when you have this fake salt, we're talking sodium and chloride, not any natural salt. We're talking, and when you have refined sugar and refined carbs, through processing and stripping all the nutrients out, this creates an inflammatory effect in your blood vessels, and then you have it disrupts hormones and calcium channels and all these things, and so your arteries are narrowed and they're hardened, and then your blood vessels are being lacerated by this sugar. It's like glass moving through your bloodstream, cutting up your arteries, and your body produces cholesterol to clot these lesions. And as it starts to repair this damage, then you get the plaque buildup in your arteries. And it's actually healthy fats that helps eliminate plaque. And they don't tell you that it takes good fat to remove this unhealthy fat that's building up in response to damage in your body. So
Yeah.
I know I've
Yeah.
said a mouthful. I'm
No,
just
no, no, those are great points. It's like when you lay it out there, we realize when we eat this way, we're putting our body under this like never like ongoing battle or abuse.
cytokine storm thing,
Yeah, like an abusive, because it's constantly trying to ward off and fight and combat all of these foreign substances, and it creates all of these like almost like processes of like immune response almost, right? And that's very dangerous. I think you're moving towards the LDL topic and cholesterol, which is good. Maybe we could bring up that recent study. Before we get there, I want to narrow down, or at least try to wrap up this topic of gut in relation to meat diets and plant diets. I think what we have to do, and you've mentioned this, first and foremost, before we even consider, like, you know, I'm a plant-based eater or a meat-based eater, we need to figure out what's the condition of our gut, our microbiome, right? Is it in proper order, right? Because a lot of people might have all types of dysbiosis or microbiome issues that meats might be flaring up,
yes.
or vice versa. Plant materials might be flaring up. One person can say, okay, well, I stopped eating meat and now, I feel better. That could possibly be the already damaged microbiome responding positively to the plant-based materials, and vice
Yeah.
versa. Vice versa, this thing could happen. But the problem is, it's not that the lack of meat and the plant foods has fixed anything, and it's not that the lack of plant foods and the increase of meat eating has fixed anything. It's the microbiome is still has issues that you haven't addressed, and the fact that you've made some change and you feel a difference has, in a sense, deceived you in thinking that you're on the straight and narrow and everything's okay. So, and I only say this because of research, of course, but also personal experience. Addressing the gut first and getting to a baseline, right, where you could get to this type of homeostasis and move from there, and then start to introduce different types of foods that you like and see how you react to them. And I think this starts with addressing the gut first. And this is regardless if you have issues or not, but I'll talk about issues in a second, which will kind of in a sense spawn this movement, to want to do
Right, right,
something, because some people might feel perfectly fine. They might not have some of these issues I'm going to mention, so they might feel like, well, I don't really need to change my diet. But then at the same time, unless they're going and getting tests for certain things, they're not really sure what's going on in there, regarding the different functions of the symptoms or systems. Just because you don't feel symptoms or feel any pain or anything, it doesn't mean that everything is in working order. So that's the hard part, right? We still could be damaging ourselves and not realize it. So even feeling healthy sometimes isn't an end all, right? But I do believe thriving, when you feel like you're thriving, when you are thriving, say proper energy levels and some of these other things I'm going to mention in a second, I think we could be pretty confident in that we're all right, right? But before I go into those issues, I want to say the idea of elimination diet through fasting, and some people will pick a vegan elimination diet, right? That has not worked for me personally, but that could work for someone, right? And then of course there's carnivore, which is another form of elimination diet. I would say another good one that's less elimination but more strict diet is GAPS diet, which seems to work very well for autistic children, and actually even lessen symptoms once this diet starts to become a normal aspect of their lives. And then through the research and a lot in the papers, you discover like, wow, possibly, again, these papers always have to be taken with a grain of salt. Some of these issues, these neural issues, and even social issues could stem from uh, uh, dietary problems, right? Or allergies, and especially jabs. I believe jabs have quite a bit to do with most of our issues that we experience as very young children. But then if you mix bad nutrition with jabs, I mean, imagine. So gut health, fasting, whether that be back to the extremes, right? We have to address the extremes. The extreme diets I don't believe are sustainable personally, right? Just because I personally believe we're omnivores. So I don't think a carnivore diet is sustainable, though many people today are proving that that might be wrong, right? There's a lot of good
right,
evidence
right.
now that the carnivore diet seems to be pretty sustainable. Personally, I don't think it's necessary, right? I look at these types of extreme diets for elimination and getting yourself to a baseline, and then you can start to introduce other foods and get back to a more balanced whole type of diet where we can have a little bit of, grain, a little bit of starches, some veggies, some fruits, and some meats and some fats. And,
Right.
I think that's where the general state of humanity should be, right? It's only the fact that we've been damaged over processed foods and lifestyles for so many years that now we have to start going to some of these extreme diets just to get back in order. You know what I'm saying? So, clean the gut, right? That's the first thing we got to do. Clean the gut. That's typically done through elimination diets and fasting. And so for me, what I grew up always having uh, uh, gastro issues, right? I have IBS, all of
Same
these
here.
things,
Same here.
lactose intolerant, all of these things. Like my whole life as a child, I mean, I couldn't eat any real dairy at all, ice cream, even though I still ate it. I paid for it. I dealt with it. And you start to
Same here, man.
you start to come accustomed to dealing with bloating, dealing with irregularity, right? Yeah, we're gonna get a little, it might get a little graphic with
Hey,
some of this
it's
stuff,
real
but
life, man. This is real life. People are suffering with this right now.
yeah, but irregularity, a loose stool, right? Just constant intestinal pain and cramping and stuff like that. It becomes a normal aspect of life, and you learn how to deal with it. You learn how to literally deal with it, and it becomes an aspect of who you are. And after a while, the pain just becomes a general state of your life, and you just learn how. Indigestion is another one, Van. Good to see you, by the way. You just learn how to deal with it, right? But for me, what changed a lot of that was when I actually started to try to pay better attention to what I'm eating and how I feel after I eat certain things. So I would start eliminating things, and then I did the whole carnivore for a while, and that transformed my life as far as how I felt with food and my life overall emotionally in response to that. So that helped me a lot. Fasted, did a whole like fasting lifestyle for a while, did the carnivore for a while. And then I started to just eat very, very clean and slowly introduce things back, like sweet potatoes, maybe white rice. The veggies I would introduce back: broccoli, green beans, asparagus, a little bit of cauliflower. That can make you a little gassy, but once I cleaned my gut, I was able to actually eat broccoli and cauliflower and not get gassy, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
But prior to that, when my gut was in bad order,
Nice.
certain veggies would have me bloated and gassy and all of this stuff. So things transformed after I cleaned my gut, did an elimination diet, and then started to slowly, over about a 6 month period, introduce food back into my life. And through that reintroduction, I started to learn what works with my body better, and what is most efficient or sufficient. It gives me also, how do you feel after you eat certain things? Do you get tired? Do you get irritable? I know there be times where I eat like some really bad food from like fast food or something, and I just feel like crap after. Well, that's because it's attacking your limbic system. It's doing all types of things to you internally, right?
Right.
Once I started eating in a way that was clean and whole and consistent, I never had those issues anymore, ever. Any of them, whether it be bloatedness, gas, irregularity, emotional fluctuation, just feeling tired, feeling irritated, all of that stuff. Never experienced it anymore, and I haven't since. So those are some issues I was going to talk about. So issues like, you want to make sure, these are ways to know, in a sense, they're ways to gauge where your health is at. What time do you wake up in the morning? Do you wake up at the same time pretty much every day? Regularity, not just in bowel movements, but even in your circadian rhythm. These are just ways to gauge where you're at. If there's a lot of conflict, if there's a lot of inconsistency, that's typically a bad sign,
Right.
because the more the body is in a cyclical kind of motion, cyclical kind of function, the better, right?
Yeah.
So, are you getting at least 7 hours? Sometimes 6 hours is enough for people, especially the younger you are. 6 hours to 8 hours a night. Are you getting up roughly or relatively around the same time? Of course, that means you got to be going to sleep around the same time too. Right? So that's the way you kind of do it. Make sure you're going to sleep at the same time, and waking up at the same time every day. And are you having bowel movements at roughly the same time every day? Okay, so timing, regularity is very, very important regarding digestion. It also gives you an understanding of where the gut is. Homeostasis. There we go, Jennifer. Also, and again, it might get a little graphic here, but what is the structure of your bowels? Are they loose? Are they solid? What's the color? Right? These things are important. You want regularity. You want similar colors, similar structures, similar timing of release. This is what you're looking for. When you don't have that, which is very typical today, when you got to run to the bathroom because it's going to slip out, these types of things are caused because of what our how our body's reacting to these types of foods that we're putting in our system. So these are important. Also, with urine, you going too much? Is your urine too dark? Or do you feel pain? All of these things. All these things are horrible, and these are what I would call issues that need to be addressed. And we need to start. These are very easy ways to kind of get the system back in order and start feeling a lot better. So that's shape, color, structure, regularity, and gas. Right? Do you get gas often? Especially, do you get gas immediately after certain foods? You might not want to eat those. Bloating. Bloating is a clear sign of gut issue. You're eating the wrong stuff. You shouldn't be bloated. You shouldn't have gas regularly. I know a lot of us are just used to it because this is how it's always been, but that's not, it shouldn't be that way. It really shouldn't. And you could easily fix it by just changing the way you eat. So I think I just wanted to lay those things out there as we get into this more objective kind of view.
Yeah.
Before we could even talk about diet, we have to figure out what's wrong. What's going
They,
on? What are your issues? Are you
right.
where you need to be? Once you're where you need to be, then we can start figuring out, okay, how am I going to go about my eating life? Before
Yeah.
we get there, let's kind of fix whatever problems we've been dealing with. And those are
Yeah.
some ways to do it. Regularity in those areas, fasting, elimination diets.
Man, I got to touch on what you said. You hit it right on the right the head right on the nail about what you said about healing the gut and developing. A lot of people don't have a very acid stomach, and you know, your stomach should be very acidic, and to actually break down the food when you're talking about proteins and breaking down these proteins in the stomach so that you don't get leaky gut, IBS, where you have proteins and toxins leaking through your mucosal layer in your small intestines. And that's because your food is either poorly undigested, or it's full of chemicals and such that disrupt the microbiome and mess with your mucosal layer and all of that stuff. And man, it's all the stuff you're talking about, because most people, when they think of allergy, we're thinking about it as an institutionalized word, and not a response to toxins, not a response to synthetic counterfeits food, GMO. Like people never heard of this word gluten until pesticide and GMOs came out. And now all of a sudden gluten became an issue. But I guarantee you it wasn't an issue when people were growing foods and using natural heirloom seeds, and they got away from pesticides and all this. There's so much manipulation about food supply that people don't even think about it. They just assume that, oh, I eat carrots, or I eat apples, or I eat a steak, but we're not thinking about is this animal that, when you talk about steak, is this an animal that was raised properly to eat uh, to graze, eating grass without pesticide, or is it GMO corn fed, or is it how was it slaughtered? How was it nurtured, and the conditions that they raised this animal in? Was it crowded in a stable where they have to give antibiotics because it was just a very unsanitary living condition? Or they you know what's the manipulate the growth of the animal through who knows what? I hesitate to use the word genetic manipulation, but they're doing something to grow these animals faster and kind of have this very superficial growth where the animal's large, but the quality of what's being produced is nutritionally deficient and weak. And so you're eating basically something that looks like meat, but with no nutritional value, and your gut is screwed up. Like you say, big pharma, through structuring a society where you have to go to school and get these injections. You have to do these things to participate in society, especially if you are, our age or older. This was normalized. This was kind of like a tradition where people just thought that, no, you're just supposed to do this. We didn't question germ theory. We didn't question any of these things. We just thought that people had to do this to get there. Even when you talk about milk, I can't drink milk really at all. Even though as I healed my gut, I can kind of do butter, because butter is a good source of vitamins, and it's good to cook with. Like you say, we talked about tallow, and even cooking with animal fat. That used to be all people cooked with long ago. Now they're replacing that with margarine, partially hydrogenated oils, seed oils, and um, all kinds of inflammatory synthetics. This stuff is not even real, and you're cooking your meat, if it's even good quality meat, in this very synthetic oil that your body won't even recognize. It's kind of like corrosive to the cells of your body, just causing all kinds of, they call it autoimmune, when your body is attacking the cells, but it's really attacking the assimilation of a toxin into the cell. So it has to destroy these toxic cells. And they call that autoimmune when the body appears to be attacking itself, but the cells are being poisoned. Your body's really trying to manage and remove these toxic cells, these dying cells, so that they don't affect the healthy cells around them. And a lot of diseases are propagated through that means, where we have these toxic dying cells creating a fungus to infect the surrounding cells. And this is all done by this manipulation of the food supply. Um, did you want to? I got a few articles I want to share. Did you want to pull up any before we?
No, I don't have any to pull up. I'll just add on to what you're saying. And yeah, I would about milk. Pasteurized milk, especially ultra pasteurized, it can be problematic, right? Because what it does is it eliminates a lot of the the good bacteria and enzymes that we actually need. So raw milk definitely is the only type of milk I drink, but that's only because I have access to it. I do understand it's very difficult to get access to it. So without raw milk, um, I would probably not drink it, honestly, even though I think it's very good for you as far as its calcium content and its fats. But I've never been able to digest well milk outside of raw milk. So honestly, if I didn't have access to raw milk, I probably wouldn't drink milk at all. And it's not because I don't like it. It's just I also have a similar issue with it, and just based on the pasteurization, it does rob it of so much goodness that it's almost pointless. But it does have use. The fat content alone is very, very useful, especially for children and people who are trying to increase strength, like in strength training of any sort. Milk is really good, but you just want to make sure you want to stay away from hormone additives in any type of meat. It's not easy to get grass fed, grass finished meat. It's actually very
Right.
difficult in certain areas, and it's expensive. I don't only eat grass fed, grass finished meat. I do eat some grain finished meat. I do sometimes when especially when if I go out to a restaurant, I don't know where that meat comes from,
Yeah,
right?
right.
So,
Right. Right.
and I do go to restaurants. I'll go to a steak house every once in a while, you know what I mean? But the food in my home that I cook daily, I tend to stick as much as possible to grass fed. I bulk order, so that's always grass fed.
Right.
But
Right.
there's times when I buy other meats, other cuts, that I don't get from my
Yeah. I
bulk
mean,
orders. But I would say try your best, like where it says no additives, no hormones added, etc. You want to go that route. The grain, uh, that's pretty hard to escape in many cases, but um, I from the studies actually, and I've looked at some recent studies regarding grass-fed versus grain. It's not a huge difference, and it really depends on how much meat you're eating. Like if you're a carnivore, it's way more important. Okay, it's way more important. If you're a carnivore and you're eating a ton of meat, especially red meat every day, it's way more important to consider these things. But if you eat red meat once a week, couple times a week, maybe once every couple weeks, it's not as big of a deal. It really depends on where you're at with that kind of consumption. Personally,
yeah.
I eat quite a bit, so I have to be more aware of what type I'm putting in my system. So I think those things are very, very important to consider. It all depends on your lifestyle. If you're an athlete of any sort, it's more work. It's
Right.
a lot more work, which isn't always fun. But
That's just how it is. You
yeah,
know, and it's interesting because I tell people when I do have to eat out or eat on the run, I tend to make sure I acidify my stomach. I literally do apple cider vinegar. Like if I'm going over someone's house to eat and I don't really know that how they prepare their food, and I just kind of make sure my stomach is very acid when I'm eating the food because it helps to break down the food in case the food is not, good quality food. The worse the quality, the harder your stomach is going to have to work to break down this food, and you pose the risk of having undigested proteins move into your small intestine, fermenting, causing leaky gut, gas, and all this other stuff. Indigestion basically is when the food is not properly broken down into its absorbable components, amino acids and whatever. And if your body is nutritionally deficient, you're not going to produce the right stomach enzymes, the right all these digestive enzymes that go into breaking down, particularly protein. This is why if you're nutritionally deficient because you're just not eating food of good quality, that will affect your stomach enzymes, your digestive enzymes. And if you don't have the proper enzymes to break down meat or vegetables, then you're going to get gas because food that's coming. If you think about the digestive gastrointestinal tract is a closed system from when it enters your mouth and goes out your backside. And so if food is moving in that system undigested, it's going to ferment. It's going to become putrefied. It's going to turn it very toxic in your body because your body needs to eliminate this stuff very quickly. Think about a baby. A baby is a healthy child. Healthy baby is a picture perfect example of a healthy digestive system. It eats food that is literally digested, and then it gives a bowel movement almost very quickly. The food doesn't linger in the system, especially when the baby's breastfed. It's almost like they literally breastfeed and then poop very quickly. And that's how, when your body's properly digesting something that it can handle, that's how quickly you should eliminate. So if you imagine in this America, people are overeating. They're eating more than 3 times a day. You really don't even need to eat 3 times a day unless you are exerting a lot of energy and force to require that much food. But most people are not that busy. We're not running triathlons to eat large, multiple large meals a day, and we don't have the digestive capabilities to break this food down, and so we have all these digestional issues. And here's the thing: a lot of illnesses, and I did this on my gut health stream. A lot of illnesses begin with poor gut health. Undiagnosed, or not diagnosed because that's the whole issue, but unidentified gut issues because of lack of knowledge or awareness of these issues, and it creates systemic problems with the microbiome, with the growth of mold and fungus in the body, with your body suffering from nutritional deficiency because
Oh
of
yeah, gold, mold and uh, what'd you say?
fungus.
Mold and fungus, very very important, man. That if you have a mold, you might not even realize you have a mold and fungus issue, but that could be what's causing a lot of these other issues we had mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
And if mold or fungal issues in the gut are there, you want to stay away from sugars of all kinds and grains as well.
Yes, it
Um,
feeds them.
yeah, it literally feeds them. So yeah, that's I'm glad you brought that one up because that's another thing people might be dealing with and not realize it. Hence the importance of elimination. You go into elimination for a while, you start to kill some of these parasites and growths and fungus, etc., that might be in that system. The hard part is you're not really sure exactly what's happening, but eliminating certain foods for a certain period of time is very very good for the digestive system to kind of like rehabilitate itself.
Yes, this is why bone broth is very good to heal the gut because it literally is your stomach doesn't even have to. It's almost like as close as you can get to breast milk for adults.
Yes.
Bone broth just literally goes through the system and easily absorbed without expending a lot of energy because digestion requires a lot of energy. And if you're constantly eating, you're robbing your body of energy that it could be using to repair and heal other areas. And so that's why when you do the 1 meal a day or you intermittent fast, you're giving your body time to rest, heal, and then divert energy to other systems in your body, which are equally important. You don't want your heart to suffer because you're always eating, your brain to be foggy because you're always eating. That's why you're sleepy after you eat. It requires a lot of energy, especially if you have these high refined carbohydrate, processed foods kind of diet. Man, your body is going to struggle. It's going to spend way too much energy digesting food. It's going to get very little nutritional value from a logical perspective. That's inefficient. You're
Mm.
spending all this energy to break down a ton of food that's going to create a ton of waste, and you got barely any nutrient quality from this food. So you're robbing your body. You're not putting good stuff back in. You're not replenishing your energy sources from good food, and that's just why chronic fatigue,
Mm.
heartburn, issues of the gut are usually the first symptom of some kind of systematic breakdown.
Very good point. Very very good point. And we've been engineered culturally to eat in a way that's almost nonstop, like the snack lifestyle that we
Yes.
all probably experienced growing up. You have your 3 meals a day, but then you have your snacks in between. So what happens is our body is constantly in a digestive state, which requires so much energy. and your body can only produce so much energy at a time. So imagine if your body is preoccupied with digesting, not just, and not even natural whole foods that it would probably digest rather quickly, as you had mentioned with the baby example. If you're eating all this heavy stuff that's, loaded with all types of processed things and chemicals and substances, and it's just dense, your body's working real hard to break all of that stuff down. And these little snacks we eat out of these bags and boxes are causing a lot of fatigue from the breakdown. So if your body's constantly breaking food down to digest it, imagine all of the other processes in the body that aren't getting the energy it needs, to function properly. So I think this is what you mean by you get all types of breakdown and just general fatigue. So this speaks to, say, one meal a day or intermittent fasting being good, because it gives your body the time to actually break down the food and do other types of processes. So it's just, you feel better. And that's why when people say, oh, I feel so good all the time now that I intermittent fast, that has a lot to do with it, because you're now actually giving your body some time to do what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
And you feel, and you just actually feel normal. Before, you didn't realize that wasn't normal, feeling like that all the time.
Not at all, man. And it's, it's like I said, it's a lot of issues going in with the gut. I want to read this real quick about bioengineering. Now, unfortunately, hopefully everybody's aware about GMO, non-GMO bioengineering. They're changing the term, the words. They're giving different words to describe the same thing. It's altering what they would call the genetic nature of the food. So I'm gonna simply read some of this. I didn't actually, the one I wanted was a PDF, and I didn't feel like going through all of that. But I'm gonna read this. It says the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture Sonny Perdue announced the National Bioengineered Food Disclosure Standard on December 20th, 2018. The National Bioengineered Food Disclosure Law passed by Congress in July 2016 directed USDA to establish the national mandatory standard for disclosing foods that are or may be bioengineered. Now, let me just say this: just because it says it doesn't mean that it's not. Let's just put a disclaimer there. We're trusting. You shouldn't be trusting these corporations, these government agencies, and institutions anyway. And so, hopefully, everybody's understand that we're not like giving them credibility. This is just to show you what they're saying, and you have to already know that we trust God's word. We're not, and God's word teaches us not to trust these entities, these institutions, and such. It says the standard defines bioengineered foods as those that contain detectable genetic material that has been modified through certain lab techniques and cannot be created through conventional breeding or found in nature. Now, that should bother anybody. The fact that they're telling you that this is what it is, not found in nature, and not even conventional breeding is an issue, because what that means is that they're breeding weak strains. This is why you got seedless grapes and seedless watermelons. They're breeding weak uh, strains of these foods that don't reproduce. And in nature, a crop that doesn't reproduce is a damaged, weak crop. And they're breeding this, and it's probably less nutrient um, dense as well. So basically, they're creating these foods that look good. They're like unnaturally sweet, but really have no quality. And that's not even the worst issue. It's this lab technique. Now we know about CRISPR, we know about lab grown meat, and as much as that should already disgust people, I mean, the fact they're telling you, they have legislation on the books that I think in someplace in San Francisco or Washington D.C. they're selling lab grown chicken, and they don't even have to tell you if it's lab grown. That should just mess you up. But this is the world we living in, lab grown. If they're telling you this, then they're realizing that the world has reached such a level of moral bankruptcy and poor cognition that people don't even question these things anymore. Like that, they're basically mocking how um, degraded society has become. That they can say this out loud, and people still go out and eat this. That's the lack of awareness, the cognitive dissonance that people have about reality now, because everybody is they're living virtually so much that we give little, and I'm not talking about us, but we give little credibility to real life. It's like as long as you're eating what some celebrities eating, you don't care what it is. You're being conditioned and going through some kind of psychological conditioning to just eat food based on how you feel, not connected to a lifestyle and what's good for you to live and interact and move in society. That's gone. So let me continue. It says the implementation date of the standard is January 1st, 2020. So this is old news, except for a small food manufacturers whose implementation date is January 1, 2021. The mandatory compliance date is January 1st, 2022. Regulated entities may voluntarily comply with the standards until December 31, 2021. So as you see, there's a lot of stuff going on. Was this being promoted in the news? Of course not. You have to look this stuff up. They put it out here. So basically, when it comes out that the food is corrupt, they're going to say, "Well, we told you. You just didn't research it. You're too busy talking about celebrities, too busy involved in social engineering to see what laws were being passed." Those of us who are awake, we understand the attack on small family-owned farms. Um, they basically fined and regulated them out of existence. And then Bill Gates and some other guy bought bought up majority land, just like Jeff Bezos is buying all the houses, and commercial businesses are buying homes so they can make everybody a renter. Well, they're buying all the land so they can commercialize and corporatize our food supply and create under these regulations where they don't have to tell you how it's made and they don't have to tell you what's in it. They can just put a label, which means pretty much nothing. I mean, even when you see something saying organic, like if you didn't go to a local farm, a family-owned farm, they have all kinds of litigation to use words to basically make organic mean nothing. I mean, it sounds good, but that's they can say non-GMO under these conditions. Like when they say the meat, they can say, "Oh, this meat is grass fed," but that just means it could be fed um, grass for just a small period of its life. It doesn't account for birth to slaughter, what it's been eating the whole time. So they could just do things to circumvent legal regulation or legal. They got ways to circumvent these ways where they don't have to really tell you the truth. They can kind of lie. And I'm bringing this up because I want people to have awareness of what's really going on and that this is on a federal level. This is something I believe in partner with the United Nations, WEF. Um, they know food is a vital part of our social infrastructure and our survival mechanism. So they're going to attack the food supply just like they're going to attack the living inflation, another tool to kind of force people to be dependent on whatever, you know,
Yes.
you know. So look at the cost of food. The cost of food now is almost equivalent to rent or mortgages.
Oh, it's
Used to be,
amazing.
because now those are crazy, but to eat is expensive.
Have you seen this recent clip that's going viral right now on social media from Home Alone? Have you
Um,
heard about this? It's pretty viral.
nah, nah, nah.
So
What's
do you remember the scene? I believe it was Home Alone 1 when he
uh-huh.
went grocery shopping, right?
Yeah.
And I guess people clipped it
Mm-hmm.
and you can see the price he
Oh
paid
man.
for all that food. He like he bought a bunch of stuff.
Right, right.
And of course it's a movie. Okay. So but still, I think the price of what he paid for was I think pretty accurate
Is
with
this Home
regard.
Alone 1?
I believe it's Home Alone 1.
Okay, let me see what year that came out just to give
That
reference.
was 91, I think.
Okay, 91.
90, 91, 90.
Yeah, I think
Ni-
it's 90 or 91.
Yeah, it's 90 or 91.
Yeah, 90. Yep.
Okay, 90. So it's going viral. People are flipping out because they're comparing that scene and that price tag to what we would pay today for that amount of food. And it's like triple or something. And
Wow.
everyone's going crazy about it. And for good reason. A shout out to B1. He had a good point here. He said that's part of it, Hulk. But the real truth is they just don't care if you know anymore, right?
That's true.
because everyone's broke. And that's so true. And that's why this bioengineered product is very rational, given this truth that it's a mixture of the general population not being able to really afford a healthy lifestyle. Now, I would say there's ways to work around that, but it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of time and deliberation and effort and discipline. And that's just hard to come by today. And I understand that. I can sit here and say this is the right way to do things. And, it's very idealistic and it's
Right.
maybe even very unrealistic today. But shouldn't we have some types of standards and reference that we at least can use as, resources? So great point. And I think it's a mixture of this fact that it's hard to even afford a healthy lifestyle, but also we're so far removed from a healthy relationship to food. And in a relationship, what does a relationship require? It requires effort, doesn't it? Right? It requires attention. It requires empathy,
Yes.
empathy for yourself, right? With regard to eating. I'm just
Yes.
comparing your relationship with food with a person, right? A relationship requires deliberation, effort, consideration, care, empathy, intimacy, all of these things. We've really been detached from that type of relationship with food, and we've taken on a new relationship that is defined by emotional pleasure and convenience, but also I guess we're dealing with what we can due to the fact that everything's so expensive. So there's a multitude of things going on, and the fact that people can hardly even afford to do just regular things today. I mean, the last thing people are going to be thinking about is their diet, right? Like, let's be
Yeah.
honest. Let's be honest here.
And to add on what you're saying,
Oh wait, real quick. I forgot where I was going with that.
okay.
Because we have this new bioengineered foods that offers um like mass produced food at a cheaper rate or a cheaper price. And it's very rational because of what B1's saying, as well as the convenience aspect, as well as the different type of relationship we now have with food, the convenience of it, that we're busier, we're preoccupied with stuff going on in our minds and in our lives. We don't have time to really sit and think about what we should eat and how we should even go about doing that. So they offer these very quick and convenient fast foods. And when I say fast foods, I don't just mean drive through fast food, but I mean when you go down any aisle in the grocery store, it's all fast food. If it isn't in the produce section
Hmm.
or the meat section, it's fast food. And when we think about most people spending their money and time in those other aisles, it would make sense that these industries are going to figure out ways to scale the materials. So, for instance, if people are mostly eating out of boxes, what would be the best way to produce box food that's cheaper and that can be constituted more? And what you do is you biologically engineer it, you create it in labs, so you don't got to worry about actually growing the stuff in a
Exactly.
natural sense. It reminds me of the Jetsons. I don't know if it was the Jetsons, one of these futurist shows, and they would like push a button
And the
and
food be
food
digit
food
like a
would just
laser made
it
of
just
food or something.
it just pop out.
Yeah.
It's like we're going towards that type of dynamic where it's instantaneous and it's scalable, because now we're not relying on what is it, resources that are limited. We're not relying on natural resources that are limited. We're now just making food out of thin air,
Yeah.
right? Through these laboratory genetic
And we
things, right?
put food
Now,
in quotations.
food in quotation. So now we're now able to eat more for cheap because it's actually being produced in a way that's not natural, and that we no longer have to rely on finite materials, hence new materials, metamaterials, and the whole nano stuff.
Yeah.
The whole nano industry, whether it be bio industry or agricultural, because the nano industry in agriculture is just as big, if not bigger, than the biological one. And I'm gonna be going into that on my channel. But this whole nano thing is this exactly what I'm saying here. We are moving towards a completely different process of bringing food to the population's table, and it has to do with creating new materials that are completely removed from this finite natural organic way of eating from the farm, right? So we're being pushed away, hence the importance of localism and eating whole foods. Because see, once we start eating whole foods, we escape all of these systems. Now it's expensive, and it takes deliberation, time, understanding, and purpose, discipline, all of that to eat whole foods and to cook your own food. And sometimes that's just not very practical for many today. But you see how this works. It's these industries are exploiting and leveraging the state of people's relationships with food, the state of people's economic situations, and just the state of the culture of instantaneous consumerism.
Yeah. That's it. I mean, that's why I pulled this up right now. You talk about bio nanotechnology, and
There
it's
it is. Yeah.
and even this. Notice how listen to this. Look at this. It says, "How will bioengineered food be labeled?" They're more concerned about the digital label of something than what it is. It's almost it says contains a bioengineered food ingredient. That sounds creepy because food is actually food. Like ingredients are what make meals, but they're calling food an ingredient into something else. Think about that. You're calling food an ingredient, a piece of something else. So this artificial, superficial substance has a little food in it, and that's it's crazy because it's almost like they want to have the minimal nutritional capacity in something to keep you alive because they don't really want you living in the real world. They want you living in a virtual world, almost like in the Matrix, where you're just fed through a tube of some kind of sugar-based material just to keep your brain functioning, but you're not really in real life. Because if you notice that when people ate healthier foods, what was in place? A structured family setting. Now they're focusing on the global citizen, the individual who's too busy to think about food because family and raising food and cultivating food went together. You destroy the family through social engineering. You basically destroy people eating real food because now everybody's so busy and so entertained that eating real food and cultivating real food is an inconvenience. And it's of little importance to spiritually dead, conditioned people who are just gone, mentally, spiritually, and physically gone. Like that's why fat shaming and transmaxing and all these things, like you talked about, are a thing now. It's a psychological operation on people to accept a very poor state of health as long as you have a digital imprint. They want you to focus on your digital imprint more than your actual health and body in the real world. And so it's like, hey, if you can Photoshop an image of yourself and make yourself look good, who cares how you're living in real life, even if you're in a pod? No one cares as long as you can be in the metaverse and your avatar looks good. And it's kind of like all of this is reaching a point where we see it, and that's why we're structuring ourselves as best we can to come out of this, to avoid all of this nonsense. But in this world, they don't really want you to focus on real food. They want you to be so wowed when you scan your QR code. They want you to be wowed by that more than the fact that it's not real food. People are happy to scan their hand in Amazon, and they don't even care what's in the food. It's like it's a privilege. They've ascribed an identity to being a status symbol of you. If you have these new technologies, like I look at people scanning the phone, and I see people do it. And I'm like, hey, look, to each their own. I just don't like to do it because of what it represents. You
Man,
know,
yeah.
It's
Oh man, you're hitting so many points, man.
I know my head is about to explode, and I know we don't got time. We got to do a part three, but
Man, I gotta bounce off of that, man. You're making some great points. This idea of what did you say, prestige or
status symbol or something like that.
status symbols? Okay, yes, man. It's like this speaks to what I've been trying to narrow down. This idea of like cultural technocracy or technocratic culture that has moved beyond those in power, the industrial engineer classes, etc., and those selling and making the softwares and products. It's moved beyond these entities into the culture where now people are technocratic in that, like you said, there everything is in the phone. They're doing the QR codes, everything is an app. You go to these restaurants and the restaurant runs through an application and everyone's okay with it. Everyone's on board
Hmm.
with it. It's so interesting, man. I wanted to say something else about this. Goodness, I just forgot what I was going to say. I was going to move forward with something that you mentioned earlier. But yeah, so this whole idea of people being comfortable with convenience, right?
Yes,
And we've been so far removed from real food and a real relationship with food that requires cooking it ourselves. And that's part of the relationship, cooking it. Like engaging with the food as you cook it is part of the relationship too. It's like, it's almost a type of intercourse, if you will, if we're going to use that metaphor. You're like actually engaging in an intimate way with the food, not just eating it, but even prepping it.
right,
This is part of the whole. Some might even call it a ritual. I call it more of a relationship. This is a part of life, I think. And I think it's an important part of life that's being taken away from us. And it's vital in that we're relational creatures. God has made us this way. We're social, we're relational. We relate to everything, whether it be what we do, who we are around, our families, but also what we eat, right?
right,
All these relationships are very important. So it's like we're being moved away from this relationship and we're given something like we're trading it for something else, right? So
yep,
now this new relationship we're forming this new intimate relationship with technologies and the experience of these technologies. The metaverse is kind of like the steroid level of it, but we're just
hmm,
this constant pleasurable experience we're having with image and symbol and message, and virality and all of this. We're now forgetting about that relationship we have with food because we have this new relationship with this like all-encompassing attention robbing kind of experience. And so since we no longer have that relationship with food or care about what we eat, we now just eat whatever is in the closest, most convenient place. And it tends to be these bioengineered products and boxes and things that come quick and can be warmed up in the microwave, all of this stuff. And we're getting to the point now where having a lot of that type of bioengineered fake food is looked at as wealth,
hmm,
is looked at as a status symbol. I can't, it's in my phone. I'm going to pull it up eventually. I can't do it right now, but I have this image of someone flexing their fridge and their cabinet, right? They're
right.
like flexing. They're like, look, and
Oh yeah,
it's like a $10,000 refrigerator. You could tell these people are wealthy. It's a
right, right.
big old one of big old refrigerators. And I'm telling you, there's not any food in there.
Yeah,
There's no food in there.
as long as it's a
It's like
smart fridge.
it's mixed. It's like juices and Gatorades and sodas, like all the expensive stuff, because all the stuff's expensive. I mean, all these sugar drinks, all the stuff everybody likes, all these snacks and like processed packaged foods. I mean, everything is processed, literally. And the cabinets is all boxed foods. There's no food. And they're flexing. And it popped in my head when you said status. It's like, this is it.
Yeah.
Now the status is look how much junk I have.
Hmm.
Look how much fake synthetic crap I have. Look how colorful and pretty the packaging is.
Hmm.
Look at the logos and the symbology. Isn't it hot? I'm it. Like I got my earbuds. I got all of my expensive snacks. Like it's funny to me to see it.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, what a weird flex. It's like, damn, this is where we're at now. It's like I open my fridge and it looks kind of bare. I got some meat in the corner. I got some eggs right here and a little bit of milk, and
Right.
maybe some yogurt and some pickles, and that's it. And
But
maybe some some tomatoes. That's
what's
all I got
true?
in my fridge,
When
and
you're
I look
eating,
poor. That
when
looks
you
poor to people.
yeah, but when you're eating real food doesn't last. You have to replenish it often. And
Which takes
see,
deliberation, discipline, awareness, all
yeah,
that. Go ahead.
because you might have a freezer where you can store your meat and stuff like that, or even them freezers and such. But your refrigerated, real food has a short life. And it's like once you realize that, you kind of this is why you want to have a network or a good connection of a local farm or farmers market or wherever you can get food, where you can get it almost on a daily to 1 to 3 day basis. Once you go past 3 days, you're not eating real food. Even I would say 2 days in some instances, you're not eating real food because it shouldn't be able to last that long. Now, without it being cooked, and maybe if you cook it, even reheating and reheating cooked food is even an issue after a while. I mean, certain foods you do it a certain way and you can maintain it, but you got to be careful. And once you cook it, this is why you add certain herbs and spices because it has a kind of way to preserve it naturally, like onions, cook with onions and all these things. And when you cook that in there, it actually gives it some kind of staying power naturally more than just it gives it flavor as well, but it also breaks down good compounds that could allow cooked food to, be there longer. But people don't think like that. Like bread, once you realize that bread can last 2 weeks, you're eating very little bread. You're eating a lot of preservatives, a lot of sugars, and a lot of things that are going to be good. I guess taste good, but it's not good for you. Like modern regular bread is like glue in your body. It's like glue. It's gonna get in there. It's gonna raise your blood sugars. It's gonna turn into sludge that sits in your bowel and feeds the yeast and mold and fungus growing in the body. And then you're going to interpret these symptoms as the sniffles or something like that. And you're not going to make the connection to what you ate to what you're experiencing. You're not going to make the connection unless you have an awareness about what's happening. I mean, look at this on the screen. They have oil, sugar, crackers. That's what people like to have.
Mm-hmm.
You
That's what
know,
people's cabinets is filled with, right
they
there. And
they
that's wealth. Look, I'm wealthy. I
and
got
look,
all of this.
they
Look at all
label
these cookies I got.
they
It's
label
so
canola
good.
oil as a pesticide by the EPA. It's
I'm
a
telling you.
actual pesticide. They spray it on stuff to keep bugs away. If it's killing organic life, what do you think it's doing to your body? You
Hmm.
know, just logic.
It's real creepy when you look at this. This is where we're at. Having all of this very dangerous technologies, like overconsumption of it, right? When you got somebody that don't take their buds out of their ears, got Bluetooth zapping through their brain all day. They got like
Hmm.
2 iPhones. They got all kind of chemicals on their skin, in their
Oh
hair,
man,
on their nails.
no shower filters, no water filters.
I'm saying that the cabinets are full of all these cookies and all these products that are totally synthetic, and they're not really even getting proper sleep, and they're
Oh
just
man,
drinking all this sugar, and it's like, and that's cool. Like when you see the celebrities, this is how they move. Not to mention they're doing all types of drugs, so they got their liver in all kind of mess, and it's just like, wow, this it's like slow suicide has become a fashion statement. It's so weird to me. It's so creepy. Shout out to made a good point earlier here. What this is dark matter reality says you got to go grocery shopping once a week, and that's facts.
yeah.
That's
You re-
facts. And now,
It's good.
unless you got a freezer or something, which I would suggest if you have space, even if it's a little small, 3 or 4 footer, it's good for the meat, right? But
Hmm.
yeah, you got to go once a week, and that's just how it is. I mean, when you want to kind of live that whole food, clean, healthy lifestyle, and the way you do it is you
Yeah,
want everything planned and prepped, man. You got to have a certain day during the week when you go. You got to set the time. You got to schedule it. It's organization, deliberation, man. For real, for real. It's work. you know.
Yeah.
And I do understand that's just not an easy thing to do today. And it's a real old fashioned, actually. You know, when I tell people how I live and eat, it's like old fashioned to people. It's like, what the hell?
Hey, let me tell you. So for those who have their own chickens, there are ways that you can preserve chicken eggs for a long time without refrigeration. I forget what they bury them in or put them in or something like that, but it's a way. It's natural. People have been doing this. People forget that for thousands of years, people have known how to live without modern convenience, and they thrived. So they don't want people to think back into the old ways. They don't want a lot of knowledge is being lost of how people thrive without grocery stores. Think about this. A grocery store in this modern corporate context is a fairly new phenomenon. If you look at history, fairly new. You know, people survived, and they had local markets, and had a whole economy based on people growing food. Why did they dismantle that? Why did they get rid of that? We would replace that industrialization, where we
Mhm.
had a whole economy based on people growing their own food and bartering their own self-made products and such. And what do we give that up for? The industrial revolution, this convenience of corporations and government being one entity to control your lives. That's what we gave that up, which inherently destroyed the family, because corporations need individuals, they don't need families. And so everybody's working for corporations, and who control it's like a huge web of control that was subtly cast upon society through engineering, disasters, crisis, wars. All these things have purpose to de dismantle the basic order and structure of a functional society, so they can restructure it into this corporatocracy where you control nothing. When they say you'll own nothing and be happy, they weren't playing. That's
Yeah.
that's literally their goal, is that you're just going to be this dependent slave of the system, and they want you not only morally bankrupt, they want you like unaware of any way to function without integrating into their system. They don't want you to have knowledge about medicinal things. They don't natural medicinal healing things. They don't want you to have knowledge about how to mend a broken bone, how to give birth in a home, or anything like that. They don't want you to have that kind of knowledge. They're outlawing, they're criminalizing that. They're saying you're putting everybody at risk by doing that. And they're saying if you're not, I mean, I'm only going to touch on this very lightly, but we know the concept of public health. What exactly is that? That's a weird term. That's a weird term.
Don't
Public
even
health.
mean anything. It has no,
Yeah.
it has no definition, man.
Like what? Like
It's a new speak term. That's it.
what my neighbor eats doesn't affect how my body reacts, but they want you to think that. And of course, this is all under germ theory and contagion, and we're not going to really touch that. But that's kind of where that's coming from, because if they want to have a means to control the body, they have to create a condition to where your body has to be controlled, and they did that. And same what they're doing with the climate is to control and faction society, where you have to requalify and you have to meet these new regulations and standards of moving the way they want you to move, or you're a threat to the environment. It's all ridiculousness, man. And it's crazy. Like this Newsweek article, they said toxicology warns of, I don't even want to use this word,
Yeah.
certain risk from
Yeah.
arsenic in foods. And I mean, when they say foods, they're not talking about whole foods, uh, uncompromised foods where people grown. They're talking about their food. They're
Yeah.
talking about they're bioengineered. They're talking
Hmm.
about not making you aware of the heavy metals and other things they're putting in society. That's what they're talking about. But they want you to think food is an issue. They're not breaking down the difference between real food and bioengineered food. And so people
Good
are now
point.
afraid to eat food,
Good
and
point, man.
to the point where they'll go to pharmaceuticals before they even think about food.
They're not realizing, like, oh, you're talking about this processed stuff you guys be selling us for on the cheap. But really, if I just kind of stay away from some of that, or at least cut it down a lot and start introducing more whole natural foods into my
Right.
diet, maybe I could avoid some of these things. But yeah, yeah, and I think this speaks to what we're talking about, the convenience and this new culture we have, this new culture, food culture we have, where we're not even thinking like that.
Showing your food online, mukbangs,
Yeah,
and
mukbangs, yes, good point. And which kind of stems from the whole big Instagram thing in early
hmm
2013, 2014, Instagram, before it was what it is now. It was really about just showing people what you're eating, you know,
hmm
the foodie culture and all that, right? Uh, and one thing I do want to say, I do understand it's hard to even consider some of these things when you live in like a city or a metropolitan area, and which is where I've lived most of my life. So I had to figure out how to do things, and it's difficult. One thing I used to do when I lived in San Francisco, I used to live near the Mission District, and that's kind of like a very significant Mexican community, and man, they would have these little these little natural grocery type stores where they would have stuff brought in from farms, and or actually I don't know where they bring them in from, because I wasn't really aware of any farms nearby, but this stuff is pretty natural and it's cheap too. So I used to go to these little spots, man. They would have these little Asian fish markets and meat markets. I used to go to those. So I do know in San Francisco. I've never been to New York, so I don't know how it is out there. Shout out to New York, but I do know what it's like to live in a big city and trying to figure out ways to get real food. I always go to the ethnic markets, man. Unless you're lucky enough to have a farmers market, like a weekend farmers market every week. Those are great.
right.
But yeah, I used to go to the ethnic markets, man, the Mexican ones and the Chinese and the Vietnamese markets, man. I used to go there, and that's where I would really do a lot of my grocery shopping, when I lived in that area. And it was cheap, because at the time I was bike messaging and I wasn't making a lot of money, I was barely getting by, and everything worked out. It just took some effort, really, and focus and discipline, man.
Yeah. And listen to this. Now, I want everybody to be amazed by the level of deflection going on. So it says scientists are becoming increasingly concerned about the presence of arsenic and other heavy metals in our foods. Now, they won't tell you that this stuff is being placed in the food. They won't tell you that, but they want to tell you the concern, almost like so they can deflect the cause to something else, like climate issues or something like that. Not to the fact that the food is being created in labs and a result of soil and environment that's purposely being terraformed for digitization and connection, Internet of Bodies, Internet of Things, whatever. You know, I thought about the whole spraying of the air phenomenon and about metals and certain things. And imagine if you wanted to overlay the natural world with heavy metals so that you can digitize it, so that it shows up and you can use frequencies and light and images and whatever to overlay the real world and kind of have a digital copy of everything. And so you can have a digital view of people who want to work in a digital world. And so you kind of ignore real world and you look, it's almost like how we look at weather. People used to go outside and just look at the sky. Now we go to the weather map and we look at the radar, a digital representation of what's happening in and I'm not saying that radar is bad, but when you try to overlay this into everything,
Mm.
like you don't need eyes. Like I did a video today about the smart Ray-Ban glasses that Zuckerberg was just talking about.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
I did a short, like a 20-minute video on that today that I dropped. And it was kind of like interesting because they don't want you to use your eyes. They want to make you blind in real time. They want you to ignore what your eyes see and put on these glasses so that you can be programmed to interpret what you see through their paradigm. Just ignore, the real life, defining yourself through an ontology where your existence has value according to God and not according to how you move in the system. They want you to have the paradigm of look, if you're not wearing these glasses, if you're not, wearable, savvy, or anything like that, then you're just lame. You're like, you're lame and you're out. Matter of fact, they're gonna say you're a threat to innovation to progress.
Hmm.
You're not getting with the times.
Yeah.
And
And
yeah,
the culture's doing it already. Like you have wired headphones.
man.
What does this guy do with wires on his headphones?
I like having a chronic headache 24 hours, man. I
Come
just pop
on,
my
man.
Tylenol and my, and all this other stuff. So I ignore this headache of this radiation that's being filtered through a vital area called the eardrum. And they don't want you to, like, think about it. Eardrum is a canal to your brain. And they want to put sound, air waves or whatever frequencies through a canal that goes right to the brain. And they already have some kind of AirPods that are going to measure your brain activity or something like that. I forgot something they're coming out with. It's crazy, and people are
Man,
just they're
yeah,
gonna
buddy.
salivate over this technology.
They're gonna love it. I'm telling, man. Some of the stuff they got lined up, it's crazy. But we're in a science fiction movie. Like legitimately, we're undergoing a type of rollout of a science film script, man. It's kind of wild when you think about it.
It's super wild. Listen to this. It said heavy metals occur naturally in our environment, but can also build up in the soil, water, and air as a result of industrial processes and pollution. So, and then say these metals then can be absorbed by plants, including food crops. My question is, why are they telling the public when we don't control the industrialization? We don't control these corporate industries. It seems like them telling us something that we're powerless to stop. It's kind of just worry about things that you know that don't have nothing to do with you. Like if they can say it's an issue, then it shouldn't even be allowable for us to be powerless to these corporations to even poison our environment. But they're just telling you, and you're supposed to just process and say, okay, here's the problem that we caused. The reaction is that we're telling you that a lot of your issues is because of what we've caused. Now you have to wait for us to give you a solution from what we caused. It's kind of like, I don't know, they gaslight your ego by like telling you that, like they know that most people feel powerless in this world. Like even though you're not, your awareness,
It's the extension of the learned helplessness, right?
exactly, your awareness and your ability to understand natural, practical ways of living can save you a lot of grief. I mean,
That's a good point. It's about simplicity and being boring when it comes to
yeah,
some of these things. Like some people like, and I've heard this, like, man, how do you eat like that? It's boring, how do you not get tired? It's like this is what you got to do, man. And that's the hard part. It's if you're serious, it's really simple because it's dealing with less
yeah,
and being just very very basic. Eating pretty much being colorful is good. You want color in what you eat. I agree with that. But I mean, just keep it simple, and it ends up being pretty affordable, mind you. If you put a little thought into it, it's pretty affordable, actually. You'd be surprised. You could raise a family on Whole Foods. And
yeah.
if you figure out ways to extend food's life through, storage and what is it? What's it called? Fermentation and all of this, man. I'll be getting down with some of this stuff, man. And you'd be surprised. You have food you won't have a problem, right? But it can be a little boring. But as you had mentioned earlier, the food tastes better, man. It
Yeah,
tastes good. You'd be surprised how some ground beef, real good ground beef with some pepper and some
man,
salt,
it's
some
awesome.
garlic and onions, man.
It's awesome, man.
Woo, boy,
I mean,
awesome, awesome, man. I'm telling you.
and it's so nutriently dense. You don't even have to eat large portions of it. I mean, you could eat like your body will be so full on a balanced portion of real food until you eat. I mean, granted, if you work out, you got to eat a larger portion, but you'll be able to intermittent fast because you'll be satiated and you'll be able to extend your fasting, natural fasting times longer. Because think about it, modern society is different from how it used to be decades, centuries, whatever ago, where people are too busy to eat all day. Like life was basically the lifestyle of everyone was cultivating a life that we can live sustainably. So everybody had a role of growing food, making something, producing something, where people couldn't just sit in front of the TV and just snack all day. This is a new phenomenon where work has been um, work is like a projection of us working really hard in our minds, but we're not really doing much. We're not doing much in our real life. I'm talking about as a whole. Like people sit in the office and they type little numbers or something, but that might be like functional to a business, but it's not. It's very little in functionality in real life. It's very little. So in our minds, we're gaslighting ourselves. Well, I went 8 hours of work, but all you did was like check some emails, move. And I'm not talking about people who are actually working, but the majority of the world is moving towards this, like where you gaslighting yourself and you didn't really work, but you just kind of sat there and you kind of pretend like you're doing a whole. Because I've been there. You pretend like you're doing a whole bunch of work, and you can convince yourself and say, "Oh, this is really important. This is very exhausting." But when you compare this to people who had to cultivate land and grow food and build their own houses and spend time raising children and do all this stuff every day until it was fun to do this. It doesn't have to be a chore to be self-sustainable. But we've gotten so entertained and conditioned into like it's not fun unless I'm watching somebody else do it. It's like we think anything that involves us actually being interactive and involved in our real life is boring. But watching somebody else live, this is why reality shows is a thing now.
Mhm.
Like watching other people live is cool.
And
I don't want to
social media's replaced it. Yeah.
exactly, and it's kind of like it's almost exhausting to even think about doing real work. To the point where people don't want to do it, and so we're losing passing down skills that we can sustain in our own life. Like imagine if you could build
Great
your own.
point. Great point.
Imagine if we had the skills to build our own houses. We didn't have to. I mean, think about it. You get a family. You have a big enough family, or you put like even your extended family. You come together. You can buy your own wood. You can dig your foundation, rent a tool or something, dig your foundation, build a house. Man, the amount of money that you could save, and it doesn't have to be no grand house, just a functional house that gives your needs, is durable, that you don't have to pay a whole bunch of money and have other people come and fix, but you built this house, you were part of it, so you can fix it, you can maintain it, how what it's about, the ins and outs of this home, and it's not faulty, you can wire it the way you want to, you can shield it the way you want to. I mean, they don't want people to think like that. They want you to think about getting these prefab homes, these homes already made. If you notice, they want you to live in a like, even though there's two dynamics of society. There's living in a mansion where they're basically saying, sell out and you can have a rich life and live in a mansion, or get into the groove of the city life and live in this small prison size overpriced apartment that's like the size of a prison cell. But you got a grocery store in your basement, you got the gym downstairs, you got this whole 15-minute city layout, where everything's within walking distance and all of this stuff, and you don't need much space because you're in a virtual world. You're going to put on your Oculus, your headphones, and watch TV. So you don't need space. You have virtual space. So that even the reduction of the size of these city dwellings is telling you they want you to think big only virtually, not realistically. It's crazy. I mean, if you
Yeah.
just put all of this stuff together, like Whole Foods, man. I used to go to Whole Foods. I remember when it was Whole Foods Market. They don't even say market no more because that's when they had more real foods. Now it's kind of like it's just any commercial grocery store. I mean, they may have a few
They
items
still
in it.
they still got some good stuff.
Yeah,
I go
they
to
got
Whole
a
Foods
few. They got
here
a
and
few.
there,
No,
but it's
I still go there, but I'm just saying, like,
someone bought them, right?
yeah,
A big chain or like a big,
Bezos.
yeah, and it
Yeah,
did change quite a bit after that. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying that they can't, but they're phasing a lot of like even the quality of their produce. I mean, it varies from store to store because certain locations have like all Whole Foods are not the same. Depending on your location, you could have better quality. Because I know I travel to certain locations, I get a whole different quality. Even in basic grocery train chains, depending on where you are, it means everything.
Yes.
Um, so if you want to be involved in a local kind of involvement in local chain of politics, I say you can do that if you want to control what comes into your neighborhoods and stuff. That's probably the level of politics that I think people should be involved in.
Yes.
Where you're controlling what's in your local environment, especially if
Yes.
you're raising children or something. That's cool. Now, when you
Hmm.
get into this bread and circus show of the real politics, that's kind of where, like, okay, you're just gaslighting yourself to think that this stuff isn't scripted, controlled, and all that stuff. Like, they don't want people to think locally no more because, and when you do, you have to kind of go in there in an environment where you have like-minded people around you. Like, if you move into an area,
That's hard now. They ain't no
yeah,
like-minded now. Everybody left, right, blue, red, anti con, pro con, you know what I mean?
yeah, because like like those purple lights they're trying to put up. I would definitely advocate that, and you can do this. You can protect. You can make them work hard before they put up these purple lights in front of your house and such. Because they're doing this, and some people speak out, and some people say, "Hey, I don't want this light." More people did that, then maybe your neighborhood could be spared because you don't want this unnatural light shining through your window every day. You don't want these Wi-Fi based sensors on these street lights emanating in front of your house. You don't want that.
I really would like to hear from anyone that is experiencing those lights. I don't see them much anymore. And the last time I saw them when I was in South Carolina, I was in Greenville,
Hmm.
and they were all like where I was at, they
Hmm.
everywhere had these lights, man. And they were also in North Carolina. I was over in can't remember the city.
Well, I'm
I
I'm
don't
over here, I'm over in the DMV where three states come together, and I can tell you there's certain places where I can see them just abundantly. Like I might do a video one day where I just go and
I'd
this
like to
in
know, yeah.
one neighborhood, and I'm just going to show you exactly how kind of like surreal and dystopian this thing looks. It's almost like they're preparing that these lights are going to illuminate certain characteristics or do something. Because it's like a very
I got some research on that. Yeah, it's
yeah, it's
connected
a
to
very
something.
unnatural. I mean, and of course, it's a lot of other stuff going on. This light is kind of like if you think about this light as some kind of like, uh, how certain like I'm trying to think of what's uh, a word for like connective tissue, but for like outside. If you think about it as a binding medium between things, like I don't know. Just think about this light as being some kind of medium
It's a
to like
medium. That's a
immerse
perfect way to
you
put it.
into something. It's going to
It's a
immerse you
medium.
into something
Yeah.
where whatever devices or whatever I don't know. The word. I'm trying to be careful how I say this.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Can
I hear you.
integrate and come together. Think about this Internet of bodies, Internet of things kind of paradigm. And you think about these lights in that sense, and it can get kind of crazy.
One thing I will say about these lights though, and I have heard this from several people, when communities get together and go to the city and complain, they change the lights. I've heard several different
Yeah,
scenarios like this where say a whole street got together and they went to the city and complained, and I don't remember what the excuse was. They hurt your eyes. They give
yeah.
you headaches. I mean, it's hard to look at a purple light like that. I don't know.
Almost nauseating to
Is
me.
it like a rave or something?
It's
It's
like
like
a
a flashlight.
nauseating spectrum of light, man.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's just because your body feels unease when you're through it. Like literally, I get this feeling pit of my stomach, like a very feeling of I don't. Now it could be psychosomatic because I know too much about this,
True.
but it also could be, I mean, just an unease because this I do have a physiological effect of my eyes just not being able to focus right. It's almost like it's preparing you to walk around with synthetic contacts or something. I mean, imagine if they have digital contacts, right? Everybody's walking around with a digital contacts, some kind of contacts that uses laser imaging, and this light fits in there. So instead of like, or you're walking around with some kind of maybe their smart glasses are going to integrate these lights or something. Just some thoughts, before they actually make this, before they get rid of these devices and it's implantables.
Yeah, I got a bunch of research on some of this stuff, and I'll be sharing it soon on my channel, where I will be going into the light spectrum, and I'll be comparing it to the spectrums that we're starting to see pop up all around us. And I'm going to be showing how this is actually connected to a lot of new networking technologies that are getting ready to be rolled out. So I know for a fact, just based on some of the research papers, that there's purpose behind these different light frequencies.
Yeah.
Now, what it's going to take is for people to get together, as I'd mentioned, and say, listen, we don't want this, we don't like this, and they're going to have to respond to that. I saw a video recently of, I believe it was Ohio. It was like it was like a city council meeting, and they were talking about, accelerating the development of their fifth gen towers in the area, and how it's going to bring all of these great things. And
Mm,
this is happening all across the United States. So what it's going to take is community level organization, man, like old school.
yeah.
People getting together and saying, "Listen, not on our block." You
Yeah. I
know what I
mean,
mean? Not on our block.
and it works. People don't
It
don't
does work.
this
You
works. See
do
this?
you do have local power. I'm telling you,
Yes.
you do.
And local power can spread out and become a wider spectrum of power if you start locally. Because imagine if many local communities come together over a united on one simple issue like these lights, then it can become a city issue, and then a city issue can become a state issue. Then the state issue can at least put pressure against these agendas. Because even if these, let me tell you, these agendas are dependent on people just having being apathetic
Hmm.
to the situation. They're
Very good
dependent.
point.
Like they need you to be like, yeah, I don't want to go through. I just don't want to go through the trouble, And it's like when you see these things, they want you to just say, well, I don't feel like dealing with that, and that's what it builds on. And they need people to be like that.
Yeah.
But the more people, and you know, this could be a very like civil kind of thing. It's not promoting any kind of crazy radicals to anything. It's very civil, it's very organized, and it's very practical about expressing concerns in a very practical way,
Yeah.
and coming together and say, hey, man, it's like in the '80s, people was concerned about high voltage power lines, right? And what that could cause in certain clusters of in the brain and such like that. And people was like, oh, and of course, the studies came out, oh, it doesn't do this. And then people started saying it does. And then the awareness kind of came out, you know, um, and people got concerned about that. And it's funny how people were more concerned about high voltage power lines than they are about these humongous towers
Hmm.
that are popping up even now. They're still popping these things up, and they're not just big cell towers. They're small single cell towers. They got them on schools, libraries, shopping centers.
You see
Um,
how
yeah,
they make them look like trees and stuff.
yeah,
You see how
man.
they
They
be doing that?
camouflage
Camouflage.
intention. See, they. I mean, look, man. It's right there. You don't have to sit there and be like, this is real life, man. We see this stuff every day, and we know. I mean, it's like the microwave, man. Everybody knows that you don't put your head in front of a microwave. Matter of
Mhm.
fact, don't even use it if you're
Don't
smart.
use
I
it.
know people
Yeah, if you can
because
help
I
it,
know.
get rid of that
Look,
thing.
I mean, you do the study. Don't take our word. Do the study.
Get a
Un-
toaster oven. They're real cheap. I use mine
yeah,
all the time.
yeah. Toast the oven. Use a conventional oven. Use a skillet. Stainless
Skillet.
steel. Stainless
Yeah,
steel, of course. Cast iron. You know the drill.
yeah,
No, get away from all non-stick everything. Even these air fryers, man, they have non-stick inside. So be careful about all this stuff, man, because those forever chemicals and whatever keeps organic things from binding to these surfaces is very toxic. It's very
yeah.
endocrine disrupting.
I have one. I can't remember the brand, but I'll be posting it on my health channel. I have a air fryer, a particular branded air fryer that's all metal, and it doesn't have any of these like plastic parts or anything. So I'll be putting that out there, because air fryers are cool. I don't own one. I used to
Right.
have one actually, but then I got rid of it because I was getting a weird smell, and then I noticed that there's like plastic parts in it and stuff. So I got rid of it. But I do know of one that's all metal, and it's not too expensive either. It's actually reasonable priced for what you get out of it.
Right.
They're very convenient, man. And it's easy. It really is. Again, it just takes effort. I've lived in some tiny places throughout my life, so you just have to figure things out, right? So you just get yourself, whether it be a fryer, a toaster oven, a little convention oven, or one of these little fryers that you could just plug in. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of ways to get by, even in a tiny little space. It just takes a little effort and a little know-how, a little understanding. Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to presenting some of those things to you guys, just because
Yeah,
I've lived in I've lived in some interesting situations, man, and you learn a lot of things. You get creative with less, man. You really do. You put yourself in a bind, and you're gonna figure it out. And after the fact, you're gonna come up with some pretty clever things, and sometimes that stuff is useful to people. You know.
yeah, and it's we got to get ready. Unfortunately, we got to get
Yeah,
ready
I
to
gotta
wrap
I
this
gotta
up.
get out of here, man. Gotta get home.
Yeah, but as we pull this to a close, because man, we wanted to go in on a lot of stuff, and I think we did, man. These talks, man, are therapeutic. Expressing health and because this is what we live. So when we talk about these things, we're very passionate and very connected to these subjects. That's why we're giving you what we actually do. We're not, we want you to be having, properly informed. So do your research. Don't take, just don't do stuff because we said it.
Sure.
Investigate, know
Hmm.
your own body, because everybody has a unique set of circumstances. We were talking about earlier today that one of the problems with these fad diets is that people are only doing them because of other people, and there's no awareness of like your own unique circumstances and conditions that led us to have the symptoms and issues that we have. Like I had to re-engineer my own health from birth, understanding that I was subjected being born to these injections and a lot of these pharmaceutical things and antibiotics growing up that I had to heal and bring my body back from before I even could start building on real food. Because imagine all the toxic processed food and then having these things in the body that dismantle the body's microbiome and immune function or protective systems. I had to basically get all of that stuff under control first, and then come to the understanding of real food versus fake food, and then understanding detox and healing the gut and doing all these things, and
Breaking
then
old habits.
yeah, breaking and spiritual, spiritual,
Mhm.
understanding the difference of eating emotionally and addictive habits, partying. When I was partying and being a fool, I ate a lot of bad foods, man. It kind of went with the whole party life, being, out there and eating chicken wings and all this stuff on the fly. It has a cumulative effect on your body. So just like it takes a while to destroy your body, it takes a while to bring it back. So you must be consistent, patient, and you also must be wise about understanding our conditions and circumstances are unique. So although there are things that we all can glean from what we're saying, you have to know your own unique body to streamline your own unique journey to improving your own condition and health. So, we're just trying to give you our journey and information that we've come across that it's very just been informative for us and useful in our journey. And you can discern, you can take it or leave it based on what you're experiencing and what you're discovering about your own body. But you have to be in this self discovery of your own health and body for yourself. And this is why we build ourselves on a foundation spiritually in Christ, so that we're free of a sinful, we have awareness of a sinful nature that leads to bad habits and addictions and things that we need to come out of. And we need to have the right mind being renewed in Christ to um, understand you can't trust a lot of this world in its knowledge and what it's saying. So you have to have that discernment and wisdom to know, that trusting the world and its, narratives and such is part of the conditioning to lead you down into a very bad situation. So once you get your spiritual foundation, your mind improves, and once your mind improves, your actions and behaviors will follow. So there's a way to do this.
Amen.
Overcoming, like, sugar addiction, that's more of an emotional, spiritual problem,
Hmm.
because if you're eating out of pain or bitterness or anger, there's a connection between your spiritual condition and what foods you feed this pain with. And that's why when you come
And
to Christ,
even indifference too.
yeah, even indifference, because when you come to Christ, you understand sin from a perspective of God, and not, you feeling, involved in social engineering, and you have forgiveness and you move on away from these things, and you have peace and joy, understanding our living and purpose in Christ and not in this world. And then it kind of frees you up where you're not eating to mask pain anymore. And once you get over that, it's and you have the strength to start developing better eating habits and having seeking better knowledge to improve your health. Man, once you get a taste of your body recovering and replenishing and healing, that's going to make you, it's going to encourage you further. Like, the first time I fasted from sugar for a day, it was difficult. But
Mm.
then when I went through it and I felt so good, I did it another day. And I started feeling so good. I saw my energy rising. Sorry, I had to burp. Sometimes when you talk a long time, man, it just gets crazy.
I'm telling you.
But I saw my energy rising. I felt so amazing. I'm like, and then once I went a period of days cutting out sugar, I tried to eat sugar because, I was like, oh, psychologically, I still wanted it. It was so toxic. I was like, ew, how was I eating this every day? But your
Hmm.
palate becomes like trained to this level of sugar that when you go a period of time without it, you will taste how toxic it really is. You've undone the conditioning of an addiction of just needing something, and you can see it for what it is and how toxic it tastes. Like, I can't, like, even if I wanted to eat candy, I can't, because it doesn't taste like I thought it did,
It
because I
tastes
was eating.
toxic.
Yeah, it tastes.
It's too strong. It's like, what is this?
Look, once you reset your palate, you can literally taste chemicals and preservatives and
Hmm.
toxins in the food. You can
Yeah.
taste it, just like you can smell something toxic. You can taste it, and you realize their senses, once they're refined and sharpened, they can discern a lot of things, that are truly bad for you. And it's so simple and easy once once you're freed from, these addictions and these urges that, you know being immersed in them for so long, you just are blind to your own destruction. So once you're free from that, man, it just takes off.
Soft Sands makes a good point. I'm sure damn near everything has sugar in it, and that's true.
Yeah.
Everything processed, right? When we
Yep.
think of anything in a box, anything in a plastic bag, most likely has sugar in it. I mean, stuff that don't even need sugar. You go to the store and buy a bag of buns to, make some hamburgers and
Yeah,
look and see
sugar.
how much sugar is in them buns. I mean, everything got sugar in it. So, again, the best way to escape this stuff is to just eat whole foods. Stay, go to the produce section and go to the meat section and maybe, go to the dairy aisle if you want to get some yogurt and some cheese and stuff like that. Let me tell you something that really changed my life. And this was before I went into the carnivore elimination diet to clean my gut, which didn't last too long. I did it for about, I think, maybe 90 days to a month or to 4 months, which really isn't what a carnivore kind of would tell you isn't long enough, but it did wonders for me. And then I started introducing, sweet potatoes and, greens and stuff. But what I did prior to that, which changed my life, was I went a whole month, no sugar, right? No sugar. I think the only sugar I might have had technically was maybe I had some fruit, but no sugar outside of fruit. No sugar, no bread.
Right.
No sugar, no bread for 4 weeks. Changed my life. I never felt that way. I couldn't even believe how I was feeling.
Yeah. Talking
And
about
after
getting
that,
used
I
to a
was
good
I was
feeling.
hooked. I was hooked.
Yeah,
After
man.
that, I was on the path. I was like, okay, here we go.
Man, good health is it's freeing in itself. Just feeling good, your body feels like. The first time I did true water fasting, it's going to be rough if you haven't done it, ever, because the first time you go through a real detox, your body's dumping a lot of toxins. So that's what you're going to feel sluggish. through a period. But that's why you have to drink enough water, help your flush your stuff out. Make sure you're getting your colon clean and all that stuff. And once your body releases these toxins, you don't feel the weight of your body. And I mean, you can feel like this in your 40s, even in your 50s.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as you get older, naturally your body is, degrading a bit, but you can still lessen the burden. I didn't realize how I was carrying the weight of my body around until I fasted, and I realized I feel like a kid. I feel light. I don't even feel like
Yes.
I'm lugging my body around. And we think that's normal because we're aging. Oh, it's normal to feel like this and dragging, and it's like when you fast, you're like, whoa, it's not normal for me to feel like this. I've actually didn't eat and I feel light. And after a while, you get to the point where you can fast and work out. Of course, you have to build yourself up to this because you got to make sure your blood sugars are normal and you're not insulin resistant because, and you know how to add a little bit of salt to your water because you don't want to pass out. So you
Yeah.
got to know what you're doing.
Gotta do the salt. Yeah.
Yeah, but now I got to the point where I can fast for 3 or 4 days and work out during the process and feel good. And I'm telling you, the only reason I didn't take it longer is because I don't have a lot of body fat. But if I did, I could do it, and it depending on your body fat and your awareness and just your mental fortitude in spiritual foundation
mental.
to
Yes.
fast. Because you have to, it's not just something you do for vanity. Fasting is really, it's a spiritual thing. It's making seeing the flesh and how it impedes, first of all, us living for God and how we connect to Him and His creation. And we in sin and desire and all this stuff gets in the way. So it kind of removes the sinful desire, the fleshly desires and worldly ambitions that we can see how God really created us to be in His design and His will. And you kind of release all this worry and all this anxiety and all this bitterness and anger and unforgiveness that the flesh holds on to. And then you can finally be free and live, with a healthy conscience. And I mean, because anger takes a lot of energy. When I fasted for 3 days, months, I had road rage and I was literally out of breath. But when you eat a bunch of sugar constantly, you don't see how anger and bitterness robs your body of energy because you just eat more snacks.
Yeah.
But when you're fasting, you realize that these emotional states have a really physiological effect on your body and it strains you. That's why illness can manifest through your emotional state and your mental state as well.
Yes.
So
It's so true, man.
we can do this all day.
We could do this all day, all night, man.
Yeah, man.
But we got a round 3 coming. So
yeah, we got a round 3, man. I appreciate I appreciate you coming through, man. You've been such a help and helping me like convey these topics because it's not, I mean, especially on here, man, we got to talk in code and all this stuff. It's always hard to articulate and convey what we're trying to say. But man, you definitely help. Iron sharpens iron. So we kind of bounce ideas and we sharpen each other's understandings and we come to we be able to flow and just put this information out there. So y'all make sure y'all check out. I think everybody's here is sub to your health channel. And if you're not, his links are in the description box. So be sure. I know I couldn't find your health channel sometimes when I looked it up.
And I don't have any posts right now. So I think when you don't have any posts yet, they don't even put you in the algo at all. So yeah, it's hard to look up.
But you can look up his link. It's on his channel and his videos, and it's in mine as well on this channel. So
shout out to Narrowway real quick. I've yet to really get a conclusion on the Redmonds, but I have discontinued my use of it, and I'm now just using just kind of a normal sea salt in the interim because I have come across some people saying that there's high levels of I believe lead in the Redmond, but I haven't really confirmed that. So I'll get down to the bottom of it, but as of now, I have switched up to it's kind of a generic sea salt, but even that one might, it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah, it's hard, man.
It's tough, man.
I meant to ask you about that, but look, man. His health channel is coming, man. He's doing a lot of projects, man. So yeah, let's be patient because
appreciate their patience. Yeah, Himalayan's good too. Yeah,
but that's why I'm grateful that he's coming over here, man. He's giving you previews already here. So,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, I appreciate you and allowing me to do that, man. You helping me,
hey,
get
you know
started.
how I go, man. This is look. We got to build this network where we out here, putting this information out here, bringing up awareness, from a biblical foundation because a lot of people just ain't doing this, and a lot of people are intimidated because this kind of information is under the current algorithm, it's not going to get you to a million subs.
Yeah, and a
Although
lot
you
of
are
and a lot of people are only, doing half of the battle, right?
exactly, and
They
that's
want to
why
talk about this and talk about that and politics and Illuminati, chemtrails, but come on, y'all. There's a whole other half here. We got to get
yeah,
right with our spirits. We got to get right with our bodies. We got to get right with our diets. I mean, there's a lot involved when you want to talk truth. There's a lot involved when you want to talk truth, right? So
hey,
yeah,
look,
I think we're just trying to be thorough. You know.
ain't nobody out here doing it on at your level and platform and still being bold enough to expose a lot of this stuff and promote this information. So we got to give you your due with that, man, because
Appreciate it, man.
you came in a little bit before I did because they doing everything to make sure I don't get no traction. But that's okay. We understand the persecution, man. Look, we growing. I'm growing in a way. A lot of your audience is over here, and I appreciate them coming over here. And we getting this information out anyway because the people who want it are going to find it. They're going to seek it, and they're going to find it. So the right people are finding the information. So,
Amen.
so it's
And
working
that's
out
all that
anyway.
matters. The Most High is
Exactly.
in control, right?
Exactly. All right, y'all. So look, we finish up. I'm gonna let brother Dayz go on, and I appreciate you all coming through. We're gonna keep talking about a lot of things. Y'all make sure y'all check out all of his content. Look, I'm get your notes out, man. This is good information that gives awareness to what's really happening because you got to learn how to live around this stuff and outside of it. But if you have awareness to how it's sneaking and creeping in around you, then it's going to take you captive. So we're breaking this stuff down because unfortunately, all of us can't just live out and live off grid. That's not reasonable for most people. So
Yes.
we have to have some kind of awareness to what we can do and how it's infiltrating our lives, so we can avoid it as best we can. So on that note, we we talked about pretty much what we want to talk about. Next time we can do the Q&A.
Yeah,
Wish we
do a
had time.
Q&A.
Yeah, we don't can't. We'll do it next time.
Yeah.
So on that note, I'm gonna say what you say, man. All praises to the Most High in Jesus' name, man. We thank you all for coming. Praying that you're protected and edified through the Word of God, because that's where your heart is guarded at, in His Word. So
Yeah.
stay in His Word. Let's keep preaching the gospel and let's live it out and express the love of Christ to one another as He loved us. And that's all we're gonna say. So peace and blessings, and we'll catch y'all on the next one.
Peace.
Peace.